The Lord be with you.
With your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. After he had fed the people, Jesus made the disciples get into a boat and precede him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. After doing so, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When it was evening, he was there alone. Meanwhile, the boat, already a few miles offshore, was being tossed about by the waves, for the wind was against it. During the fourth watch of the night, he came toward them, walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. "It is a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. At once Jesus spoke to them. "Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter said to him in reply, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Jesus said, "Come." Peter got out of the boat and began to walk on the water towards Jesus. But when he saw how strong the wind was, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me!" Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught Peter and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" After they got into the boat, the wind died down. Those who were in the boat did him homage, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
There is a lot of noise going on in the world right now. We've got violence in Chicago, whether it's a rapper being killed on Oak Street or a stray bullet killing children on the south and west sides. We have Black Lives Matter protests. We have social justice protests. We have an explosion, a horrific explosion in Beirut. We have natural disasters. We've got hurricanes, tropical storms, some places drought. We have an election coming up, and you see all the hype regarding the election. And of course, overlaying all of this is the coronavirus. Every day we are inundated with the infection rate, how it's increasing, the death rate, how it's increasing, the restrictions on how we live, going shopping, having to wear masks, working from home if we go to the office, maintaining social distancing, again, washing our hands and wearing a mask. And then how about school? What are we going to do? How are we going to keep our kids safe? They go to school, is it going to be online? Is it going to be in person? Is it going to be a little bit of both? We just can't get away from it. Now you're saying, "Deacon Pat, what the heck are you doing? I came here, it's 85 degrees out, I came to Mass, right? I want to get away from this stuff for an hour." Or the people watching at home, I got up to watch us on video, and guess what? He's speaking about this. I can't get away from it. Well, why am I doing that? Because Elijah, in the first reading from the book of Kings, also was going through a lot of noise. As you know, he was a prophet in Israel. And King Ahab and his wife Jezebel had turned to worshiping Baal. So they had killed all of the prophets of Israel except for Elijah. And so Baal had about maybe 450 priests, prophets. And Elijah was really worried because all of the Israelites were beginning to turn to Baal. Not all of them, but most of them. And he was concerned. So he put a test to the prophets of Baal and said, "Look, guys, what we're going to do is we're going to build a big pile of wood. We're going to put a bowl on it to sacrifice to the gods, right? I'll do one, you guys will do one. And whichever one gets fire coming down from heaven, then that is the true God. So you can't light the fire, you just have to have it sit there." So he let the prophets from Baal go first. And so what they do, they bring this big pile of wood, put a bull on top, and then they start dancing around, hopping around. Nothing happens. Elijah says, well, maybe you ought to speak a little louder because maybe your God is asleep. And so they keep hopping around all day. Finally, they start even wounding themselves because that's part of their ritual, and nothing happens. So what does Elijah do? He takes this big pile of wood, puts a bull on top, puts a moat around it, and says, pour all sorts of water on it. So they poured water on it, so the wood's all wet. We've got the moat all filled with water. And of course, what happens? He prays to God, and the fire comes down and burns up everything, even laps up all the water. So he's victorious. Now, Queen Jezebel is not very happy about this, and so she sends out her army to kill Elijah. So what does Elijah do? He gets himself out of Dodge, right? So he goes and he runs away. And he is so despondent and he is so tired that he says to God, look, I'm alone, just take my life. And God says, no, go up on Mount Horeb, Mount Sinai, and there's a cave up there, go out there, and I will pass by. So there's even more noise, because he goes up there and what happens? There's this big, strong wind, but God is not in the wind. There's this big, strong earthquake, but God is not in the earthquake. There's this big, strong fire, but God is not in the fire. And then there's this, it's silent, and there's this tiny whisper, and God is in the whisper. And so that's kind of the lesson today, that we need to have silence in order to listen to God. Jesus does the same thing in the gospel. Last week, remember, he fed the 5,000 people with loaves of bread and fishes. He's got huge crowds everywhere. But what does he do today? He sends the disciples away. He sends the crowds away. Then he goes up in the mountain and he prays by himself in silence. He listens to God. So we have all this noise coming at us, and it's especially hard now because a lot of us are working at home, we've got children distractions, we've got all sorts of things going on. But it's hard to listen to God among the noise. So what do we need to do? We need to carve out some time. Go into a room, lock the door for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Go out in the patio. Just kind of relax out there. Perhaps even take a walk. I mean, even Jesus had to order the crowds and the disciples away in order to listen to God. Take some silence. Let God speak to you. It's really hard to hear him in the noise. You need to carve out that little piece of time. And what that will do is it'll give you strength to deal with all the noise. And it will give you peace. May God's peace always be with you.